the verses before 194, the verses to do with Hajj is there, some of the aspects of Hajj. Then the verses we covered was to do with if they attack you whilst on your way to Umrah, or if they attack you in the Masjid al-Haram, if they attack you in Mecca, what is the response? What can you do? What can you not do? What are the rules regarding that? That's what was covered. So it's all connected, although different subtopics. So again, this comes to these two verses. The first verse will be related to, again, what if they attack you? How much can you retaliate? This is one aspect. And also the boundaries of justice. If you retaliate, or if you want to recover your rights, what are the boundaries of doing that? What are the limits? And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recommend in that respect? And then the second verse will be something very important about, it's connected as well, we'll see how it's connected, but it's about spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if the community does not spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to strengthen the community, then it will face destruction. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in the second verse. So these are the two verses we'll be covering today, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ash-shahru al-haramu bish-shahri al-haram wal-hurumatu qisas. فَمَنِ اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ فَاعْتَدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ." A sacred month for a sacred month. Sacred things, or those things that are prohibited, are qisas, meaning there is reciprocation in those things. Therefore, whoever commits aggression against you, you also retaliate against him in the same measure in which he commits aggression against you. Fear Allah and know that Allah is with the righteous. وَأَنفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Spend in the way of Allah and do not contribute to your destruction at your own hands, with your own hands. Do not contribute to your destruction. And do things with ihsan, do things properly, well, do it well. Verily Allah loves those who do things with ihsan. So these are the two verses. The first verse, Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, he gives the following reason for the revelation of the first verse. He says in the 6th year after Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ set out with the intention of Umrah, which we covered in the previous verses as well. And we know the story. He was stopped a few miles off Mecca at a place called Hudaybiyah, where the famous treaty of Hudaybiyah happened. And he was refused entry. Subsequently, the Quraysh made peace with him on condition that he returned to Medina that year and come back to do Umrah the following year. Yet for 3 days, meaning they would allow for 3 days the following year. Accordingly, the Prophet ﷺ with his companions set out for Mecca the following year in the month of Dhul Qa'dah, which was one of the 4 sacred months during which fighting was prohibited. So the Muslims feared that they may be taken by surprise because it's the month, it's a sacred month, and even before Islam and after the advent of the Prophet ﷺ, it was a general rule understood that within those 4 months you do not fight. Fighting was not allowed. It was against the predominant culture of the time, and for a time within Islam as well, the Prophet ﷺ obeyed that rule. So the Muslims were fearing that we've come for Umrah the following year, but Dhul Qa'dah, it's one of the sacred months. If they attack us, ambush us by surprise, we will not be able to retaliate. We won't be able to defend ourselves. This was the worry of the Muslims. And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse, that the sacred month is for a sacred month, and sacred things demand reciprocation. This verse was revealed. Meaning that do not worry, do not fear, Muslims. You're making Umrah, you're with the Prophet ﷺ, you're out for ibadah. You're simply going for worship. And it's a holy month, it's a sacred month. But if they attack you, then there is reciprocation, there is qisas in that. If they attack you in the holy month, you are allowed to defend yourself. You are allowed to retaliate, but only to the extent that they attack you, not any more. You don't go beyond the limits. You don't retaliate with much more, then you've been attacked. Then you've been aggressed on. So it must be in equal measure, not more. If you go beyond the limits, if you retaliate with more, that in itself will be oppression and injustice. So this is the background to this verse. So the main part of this verse is this part, which is فَمَنِ اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ فَاعْتَدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ. So whoever commits aggression against you, you also commit or retaliate against him in the same measure in which he commits aggression against you. So this is the law of retribution, if you like. What are the issues surrounding this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you may retaliate, you may react, you may retaliate with the same aggression that was shown towards you. If somebody attacks you, you may defend yourself and you may retaliate at the same level. You know, as they say, with the same reasonable force, you may retaliate. So from this, many questions come up in fiqh, in Islamic law, etc. For example, Imam Qurtubi, he says, who's the famous mufassir from Spain, he says, what if people do not have lawful means to correct those wrongs that is done against them? Meaning the verse is saying, you have a right, if somebody wrongs you, you have a right to right that wrong, if you like, to retaliate, or if somebody takes your money or financially damages you or causes you loss, you're allowed to claim your right back. Or in this verse, it's about physically being attacked, you're allowed to fight back. So Imam Qurtubi says, what if there is no lawful means of correcting those wrongs? What is allowed, what is not allowed? What if there's no authority, etc., who will fight your case, who will redress the wrong? What happens then? He said, according to some scholars, it's permissible for a man who has been wronged to retaliate and take his right secretly if necessary, in the same measure as he was wronged. This is the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i and some others, and according to one version, one of the opinions of Imam Malik. However, there's a difference of opinion in this, there's ikhtilaf. Some Maliki scholars said that it's only for the judicial authorities to decide and not for the people themselves, especially in financial matters. Following a hadith of Daraqutni which says, أَدِّ الْأَمَانَةَ إِلَى مَنِ ائْتَمَنَكَ وَلَا تَخُنْ مَنْ خَانَكَ. So the Prophet ﷺ said, is reported to have said that deliver back the trusts to those who entrust you. Do not deceive the one who deceives you. So if somebody trusts you with something, they've trusted you with an amana, whether it's money, whether it's resources, whether it's a secret, whether it's something of possession, then return that trust likewise. But if somebody deceives you and takes some of your right, do not deceive them. Meaning, don't take your right back through deception. So this is one of the hadith that they use to say that you may not, through illegal means or through deception, you may not claim your right back if you have been wronged. If somebody has taken something wrongfully, and the only way you think you can get it back is through deception and illegal means, then you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't deceive the other person to get your right back. This is one of the opinions, and this is one of the evidence. This is one of the evidence that they use. This is also the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, who also relies on this hadith, as well as the verse in Surah An-Nisa, verse number 58. where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا. Allah orders you to deliver trust back to those who trust you. And there are other scholars of this opinion. So, what Ibn Abbas is also saying, that once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the power to Muslims and they set up proper political authority, legal authority, judges, a system of law, etc., then he said, in these situations, if somebody wrongs you, you must take it to the courts. You must go through the system. You must go through the legal means which are available. You can't just go vigilante and start doing things yourself, taking revenge or forcefully taking back something which will lead to more harm, etc. So these are some of the differences of opinion. However, this is very clear that opinion is divided. It's very clear that some people allow it, some people don't. Mainly the difference comes because of different circumstances. In the early days, perhaps the system wasn't set up. Later on, when it's fully set up, the legal means are there, the systems are there, the infrastructure is there. Therefore, people don't have to take the law into their hands, if you like. So, wherever that is available, that's what should be done. And there's some misunderstanding here as well. Some extreme groups use this kind of fiqh and understanding to say, you know, they can take anything off anybody who has taken it off them. So Muslims, you know, use any means necessary, illegal, wrong, whatever, to justify a wrong done to Muslims by non-Muslims. This is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. This is in a context, in a particular context, and according to some scholars, for that time and place, with regards to personal property, and they're talking about taking back that personal property. They're not talking about getting revenge from someone else just because they did something to you, to one of your tribe members or one of your area, land or society, etc. So people expand this and take this to another level in a wrong way. Another example they use is when Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, complained to the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Sufyan was very stingy. He was a miser who did not give her enough spending money, maintenance money, and not enough money to look after the children as well. So she complained to the Prophet ﷺ and said, can I take money from him without him knowing? Meaning secretly, without him knowing. And the Prophet ﷺ gave her permission. He said, you may take from him without his knowledge, but only that amount that you need, and for your children, that is sufficient for you and your children. So some people use this as evidence as well, but other people say, no, this was specifically a judgment made by Prophet ﷺ just for him. It's a judgment which a judge has to make. So the Prophet ﷺ here was acting as a judge, and Hind came like for a judgment, a ruling. No one can just look at this hadith and say, I'll do this for myself. No, if you're being treated unjustly, or your rights are not being fulfilled, then you go to the legal authority and redress your wrong, or you claim your rights. So this is important to understand. Couple of things we understand from this part of the verse, two important points. One is that any actions to do with one's rights, or one's being oppressed, or being victimized, or something being done, some kind of loss incurred to you as a person. In our times, in our context, where we are, obviously we must resort to only the legal means. Whether that's informal legal means, arbitration with people, somebody in the middle, judging between two people, two business partners, or whether it's in a marriage, or whether it's some other dispute. That's what should happen. We should take formal legal means, or using the courts and the systems that are available. Muslims must not mistake any of these texts or hadith and simply say, I'll just apply it by myself, on myself. and I'll take the law into my hands, because that is against the law itself here, especially in this country. So this is very important. The second thing connected to this first point actually is, you hear a lot of cases. Somebody wrote just recently that he knows of at least 10, 12 cases where the husband and wife, after they've divorced, the wife uses the legal system to claim more than her share, or claim as much as the English legal system allows her to claim. So there was a case where, before the man got married, his net worth was worth £600,000. He had a house, no mortgage, etc., etc. And they were only married for 3, 4 years or 5 years. And then the wife, after divorce, went through the courts and claimed the house, because there's a child in there as well. She had a child. Claimed the right to live in the house. He had to get out because she claimed other things. We don't know the details of the case, who's right, who's wrong. But basically through the court, she got most of the things. She got a lot of share of the home. She got the right to stay in the home because the child is there. And because of some protection issue, he wasn't allowed to come to that house. So here's an example using the legal system. I'm not talking about that particular case, but the point here is the Sharia has given us our rights. Islamically, as Muslims, we know what our rights are, whether it's a case of inheritance, whether it's a case of marriage and divorce, whether it's a case of business. The Sharia has given us our rights. If we feel we have been wronged, if we feel we have been victimized, or some oppression or injustice has been done against us, yes, we have every right to try and redress that wrong. That's nothing wrong with that. However, if we use any system, whether it's the English legal court system, or we use an arbitration panel, or whatever we use, if we use that to wrongfully claim something that is not ours Islamically, especially on those things covered by Islamic law, if we use those systems to take more than we have a rightful ownership over, more than our rightful due according to Sharia, this is problematic. If we use those legal systems to oppress another person, to do injustice to another person, to take the rights of another person, this is a big, big sin. This is a grave matter that we have to answer for on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet ﷺ himself warned about this. He warned about people even coming to him, and two parties would argue their case. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I only judge according to what is apparent, whatever is presented to me. But you know deep down, meaning you truly know how much of this claim is correct, how much is exaggerated, or how much is wrong. So anybody knowingly claiming more than they have a right to, using other legal means, this is a huge problem. Not only are you oppressing others, you're wrongfully taking other people's property or other people's rights, and you're denying them their rights. So this is, as Muslims, we must be very careful about this. Yes, we should redress our wrongs. Yes, we should seek justice. Yes, we should seek our rights, but we must do it within our limits. We must do it within fairness and justice, especially according to the principles and guidance of our deen. The second thing is dangers of interpreting single hadith or verses without full training and knowledge of fiqh and usul of fiqh, and the whole experience of, going through a systematic process of qualification in legal matters. People look at one verse, one hadith, and start applying it themselves. People don't understand there's a whole elaborate, complex system of usul of fiqh and qawaid fiqhiyya and other things that go in to make up the legal system, that go into guide how texts are interpreted. It's especially legal texts from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, the Hadith and the Qur'an. It requires qualified, trained people to look at those verses, look at those Hadith, and come to conclusions, legal conclusions. It's not for me and you. It's not for everybody. So this is very important because there's principles behind it. There's a lot that goes on in interpreting verses. For example, that verse, that hadith about Hind is a good example. There's other similar examples where the Prophet ﷺ is acting either specifically for that person, like the person who broke their fast in Ramadan through relationship with their wife. That the specific solution that the Prophet ﷺ gave to that person, where he ended up, he said, Prophet ﷺ said, free a slave. He went through the 3 options and he couldn't do any of them. He didn't have any money. He said, there's no one poorer than me in this whole valley. And then the Sahaba bought some dates and, he said, I'm more deserving of this than anybody else. So even to give in charity from somebody else, he couldn't do it. It was spent on him. But the scholar said this is a very specific case, specific ruling for this specific person. It's khas for him. You can't just apply that to everybody now. So there's rules of interpretation. There's dalalat of alfaz, of the words, of ibarat, of the nas. It's complicated. You can't just take a single hadith or a single verse. They're all interconnected. So this is very important, not to apply or try and understand Islamic law from single verses or hadith. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is laying down an important principle here, that even those who are your enemies, even those who are in that time, the mushriks, who are causing the most harm to the believers. We have to remember these are the people who ousted them from their homes, who took their wealth forcefully from the Muslims, who prevented them from coming back to Mecca for even Umrah. These are the very people that Allah is saying you have to do justice with them. That if they attack you, if they oppress you, if they do something to you, then you may retaliate, but only in a manner that is just, with justice, only to the limit that they did to you. So this is how much importance Islam places on justice. Even if it's retaliation, there's limits, there's boundaries that we cannot cross, that we cannot go beyond. Otherwise, we become the oppressor. The very thing that we are the victim of, we become the oppressor. That's why in Islam there's very strict rules around these types of interactions or situations. So this is very important. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says towards the end of this ayah, He says, fear Allah and know that Allah is with the righteous. Yes, you may retaliate. Yes, you may claim your rights. You may right a wrong, redress an injustice. But know, fear Allah, number one. Ittaqullah, have taqwa. Meaning, fear Allah, do not take anything that is not rightfully yours. Do not harm anybody beyond the limit that they cause harm to you. Do not retaliate over and above the way people aggressed against you. So in that, fear Allah. Allah is watching. Allah will hold you to account. You may think, I'm a victim, I can do whatever. No, you can't. Allah will hold you to account for anything that you do over and above. Anything that you take that is not yours, even if it's through a system, Allah will hold you to account. And if you want the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want to seek justice and win that justice for yourself, if you want to gain that right, then know that without taqwa, without fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in these limits, in this fairness and justice, you will not get your rights. You will not get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's support. As Allah says, and know that Allah is with the muttaqeen, those who have taqwa, those who fear Allah in their rights and wrongs. Know that Allah is with them, meaning He will support them. He will aid them to get their rights. He will aid them to get their justice done. But only if they do it in a way that is according to Sharia, that is in accordance to the rules laid down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only to the limit that they have a right over. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Spend in the way of Allah and do not contribute to your destruction at your own hands. And do things well. Verily, Allah loves those who do things well. According to many of the Mufassirun, they said that here, what does it mean? Spend in the way of Allah is very clear. Spending any of your resources for anything fi sabilillah, anything that is for the sake of Allah. But this verse, many people relate it to specific situation, a specific situation. Many people relate it to that the Sahaba, they said that when they fought many battles towards the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ or thereabouts, when they fought many battles, they came back to Medina, they settled down, they had family, they had children, they started with business, and basically it's peacetime. There isn't any threats and there isn't any enemies waiting outside Medina to attack them. So the Sahaba, companions start relaxing, they start settling down, becoming busy with normal everyday worldly affairs and worldly matters. And some of the Mufassirun, one of the Sahaba said, he gave this explanation that because we had abandoned striving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we had stopped striving fi sabilillah, we had come down, we settled, we became busy with dunya, this verse was revealed. Meaning, spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning do those things that will protect the community. If you're not defending the community, we're talking about, we have to remember this was a small Muslim community in Medina, right? And they had many enemies around them. They defeated some of them were still at large, some of them were, they don't know where the attack will come from. But most of the immediate enemies were defeated. However, in those days, there were no hard borders, there was no agreed borders. Anybody can come and invade and attack, etc. The Persians were there, the Romans were there. There's threat of attacks anytime. So in other words, here, what some of the Mufassirun said, that do not spend in the way of Allah and do not throw yourselves with your own hands to destruction. They said this means spend in the way of Allah, meaning in defense of the Muslim community, in case you are attacked, and be ready. And don't throw yourselves to destruction by abandoning the spending in the way of Allah to defend yourselves. So don't leave the Muslim community weak. Don't leave it without any defense. Don't leave it without any men prepared to defend the Muslim community. This is, at the time of revelation. Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, he says that the ayah includes the order to spend in Allah's cause in all the various areas, not just defending the Muslim community, but in everything. وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ is general for anything, doing good works, building mosques, educating someone, paying money for the poor, supporting the widows, the orphans, anything, all these various aspects of community work, anything that is fi sabilillah, everyone should spend. So Ibn Abbas, he said, this is general, includes everything. But he also said that it applies especially to spending in terms of defending the Muslim community. If the Muslim community is being attacked, then in its defense, to retaliate, spending for that cause, this is also applicable according to Ibn Abbas. He said it applies especially to this as well. But he also said it's wider. And then he also mentioned, Allah states, those who don't do this, then they will face utter and certain demise and destruction. Meaning, those who are in the habit of not spending to defend the Muslim community, not spending to strengthen the Muslim community, not spending in the various ways in the path of Allah, then that community will be destroyed. that community will be weakened. That community will throw itself into destruction. What does this mean for us here and now today? We need to think as Muslims, sometimes we read these verses and say, okay, that was at Medina at that time. There was a Muslim society and they were being attacked, so they had to spend money, defend the Muslim community, etc. What is our situation today in our communities? Is our community in a position of strength? Are the Muslim communities or institutions or our way of life or our values, are they being attacked? Are Muslims being discriminated against? Is the Muslim identity being attacked? Of course, all of this is happening. Us as a community, we're not strong. We're not in a position of strength. I don't mean just physical strength. As a position of intellectual and religious strength, identity strength, community strength, we are not. We are weak. And we have many, many challenges. We have many, many social ills, social problems, social challenges that are happening. We have many needs. There are lack of resources. We need so many, begin with Islamic education, information, awareness, schools and colleges. There's a huge need for Islamic education. If you want to protect the Muslim community, if you want to protect their faith, their identity, their belief, if you want to protect the way of life of being a Muslim, you need these infrastructure institutions in place. We have to have places where we can educate our children. We have to have places that support raising awareness and providing education of Islam. There's a huge need for the poor amongst us, broken families or families in poverty. There's a huge need amongst the youth who are ending up in prison, who are selling drugs, who are misguided, who are left alone to do whatever. There's many, many problems in different areas of Muslim communities, different aspects of Muslim communities. There's the whole war on terror and the after effects of that, the whole Islamophobia industry that picks out and targets Islam or the Muslim community as a specific target for discrimination, for misrepresentation, for creating hysteria around Muslims and Islam. All this is happening. Who is going to spend to defend the Muslim community from all of this? Who is going to spend to strengthen the Muslim community from our young from our children up to the teenagers to the adults? Who will spend to strengthen the Muslim community? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning the believers here that if you do not spend, if you don't strengthen the Muslim community, if you think you're just here for yourself and your family, whatever I'm earning, I'm just looking at myself, my house, my second house, my third house, my second business, my third business, and I'm in a good position, my children are all educated, alhamdulillah, that's it. No. Allah is saying here, if you do not spend in the way of Allah, you will be bringing destruction by your own hands. If the Muslim community doesn't spend to strengthen itself, to have solid services, institutes, have solid defense against some of the attacks that are coming, even to present Islam properly. We don't have the intellectual resources, we don't have the publication houses, we don't have the institutes to even articulate Islam properly so that it's not misrepresented, so that it's not made a mockery of, so that it's not used to, heighten this tension around Islam is a threat, Muslim communities are a threat. We don't even have proper institutes, research bodies, those who articulate. Some work has begun, but we as a community, each and every single one of us here, we have a responsibility. Which education institute can I help? Where can I spend? Which masjid can I spend? Alhamdulillah, we have lots of masjids. That's good. And more maybe in new areas where there's communities needed. But also the other institutes are much more needed. The social services for families, for women, for young people, the youth services. Where are these services? There's many, many young Muslims addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, involved in crime, filling up the prisons. Where are the services to intervene here? Where are the services to support these young people? So where are the universities? Where are the seminaries for Islamic education? So we have a lot to do as individuals and as communities. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to that community then, applies generally to every community, that if you don't spend in the way of Allah to strengthen and defend the community, you are by your own hands sending it to destruction. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And ihsan is to do something either very proficiently, very well, to do it at its highest level, to do something beautifully, to do something with competence, to do something with proficiency. That's ihsan. And also to be generous, right? To do good to others, to do well to others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding, وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So it's not just strengthening the community and spending wherever we want. It's doing it at a level of excellence. To have these institutes or to defend the community, to strengthen the community with excellence, with the utmost proficiency and competency, with high levels of resources, things that will really strengthen the community, things that will defend the community, things that will allow the community to be nurtured and to grow. These are the things we have to look. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says He loves those who do good things well, those who do things with ihsan. So we all have a duty, dear brothers and sisters, that don't think these Qur'an verses were only revealed for Medina, only revealed for the Prophet ﷺ, only revealed for the Sahaba, that they had to defend the community and that was done. No, we have a duty. This Qur'an applies to us. We have a duty to defend, to spend our resources in supporting and strengthening the Muslim community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, inshaAllah. We'll end here today and we'll continue next week from the following verses onwards, inshaAllah.